Transport, Infrastructure and Communities. Welcome to everyone. We gather today to study 3 departmental plans for agencies that fall under the purview of the Minister of Transport, as well as the main estimates 2019-20. A number of votes have been referred to the committee for discussion on Thursday, April the 11th, 2019, namely votes 1 and 5 under Canadian Air Transport Security Authority, vote 1 under Canadian Transportation Agency, votes 1, 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45, and 50 under Department of Transport, vote 1 under Marine Atlantic, vote 1 under the Federal Bridge Corporation Limited, vote 1 under Via Rail, and we are delighted to welcome the Honourable Marc Garneau, Minister of Transport Canada, along with his officials, Michael Keenan, Deputy Minister, Kevin Brassot, Assistant Deputy Minister, Safety and Security, and Radha Marcetti, Assistant Deputy Minister, Programs, and Andre Lapointe, Chief Financial Officer. So for the Canadian Air Transport Security Authority, we have Mike Saunders, President and Chief Executive Officer, as well as Nancy Fitchett, Acting Vice President, Corporate Affairs and Chief Financial Officer. Welcome back. And for the Canadian Transportation Agency, we have Scott Streiner, Chair and Chief Executive Officer, and Mandan Fillion, Secretary and Chief Corporate Officer. For Marine Atlantic, we have Murray Huffman, President and Chief Executive Officer, and Sean Lehman, Vice President of Finance. And finally, for Via Rail Canada, we have Jacques Fateau, Director of Government and Community Relations. Welcome everyone to our committee. Thank you for coming. I'll start the discussion by calling vote 1 under the Canadian Air Transport Security Authority. Minister Garneau, over to you for 5 minutes. I know that you're not feeling well today and really appreciate the fact that you're here with us today.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and I know that people would have been very disappointed if I wasn't here today. So I'm delighted to be here today, and if I occasionally cough and splutter, please don't worry, I'm alive and well, and I don't want to make a habit of having a cold when I come here, but I am fine. Thank you. Madame la Présidente et chers membres du comité, je vous remercie de...
Members of the committee, thanks for having invited me to meet you today. I'm here today with the people that you have mentioned.
Being done in the federal transportation portfolio, which includes Transport Canada, Crown corporations, agencies, and administrative tribunals. Regarding this year's main estimate, I will begin by mentioning that for the 4th year, Transport Canada is involved in a pilot project as we assess how effective it is to link grants and contribution votes to their purpose. To help the parliamentary study of the estimates and scrutiny of government expenditures overall, Planned Transport Canada expenditures are presented in the main estimates for 2019-2020 in accordance with the Department's results framework. The overarching goal at Transport Canada is to ensure that our transportation system is safe and secure, efficient, green, and innovative. We work towards this goal by proposing laws, policies, and regulations, monitoring and inspecting the transportation industry to ensure that these laws, policies, and regulations are respected, and funding projects to strengthen the transportation network. We also collaborate with a variety of partners, including Indigenous peoples, industry, provincial and territorial governments, and international bodies. Transport Canada's main estimates for 2019-2020 total $1.86 billion. That total can be broken down into 4 categories. $879 million under efficient transportation, $374 million under safe and secure transportation, $252 million under green and innovative transportation, and $194 million for internal services. There is also $162 million for new budget 2019 items. This is an interesting and exciting time for transportation in Canada. Innovation is delivering new opportunities and new challenges. In response, we are allocating resources to address these challenges, and we are always seeking ways to take advantage of new opportunities to make transportation safer, more secure, and more efficient with less impact on the environment. Budget 2019 announced a $300 million commitment for a new incentive program for zero-emission vehicles to help us achieve our targets for new light-duty vehicles in Canada of 10% by 2025, 30% by 2030, and 100% by 2040. First portion of that amount, $71 million for 2019-2020 fiscal years, included in these main estimates. Transport Canada demande également.
Transport Canada is also requesting $2.1 million in these main estimates for protecting critical cyber systems in the transportation sector. Budget 2019 announced more than $12 million over 3 years to implement the Modernized Motor Vehicle Safety Act. This includes using fines to increase safety compliance and more flexibility to support safe testing and deployment of innovative technologies. Budget 2019 also allocated nearly $46 million over 3 years to support innovation and modernization of Transport Canada's regulatory regime. This would affect commercial testing of remotely piloted aircraft systems beyond visual line of sight, cooperative truck platooning pilot projects, and enhanced road safety transfer payment program. I will also provide some highlights from these main estimates for federal agencies and crown corporations under my portfolio. The Canadian Air Transport Security Authority is seeking $875 million to continue to protect travelers with effective, consistent, and high-quality security screening. Budget 2019 includes $288 million for fiscal year 2019-2020 to continue securing critical elements of the air transportation system to protect the public. Budget 2019 also announced our intention to advance legislation that would enable us to sell the assets and liabilities of CATSA to an independent not-for-profit entity. The funding envelope for 2019-2020 includes transition resources to support this corporate structure change.
Seeking nearly $153 million for year-round constitutionally mandated ferry service between North Sydney, Nova Scotia, and Port aux Basques, Newfoundland and Labrador, as well as non-mandated seasonal service between North Sydney and Argentia, Newfoundland and Labrador. Marine Atlantic brings more than a quarter of all visitors to Newfoundland, as well as 2/3 of all freight, including 90% of perishables and time-sensitive goods. Marine Atlantic service is vital to the interests of companies that do business in that region, as well as to people who travel to and from the island of Newfoundland. Budget 2019 mentioned that we will extend support for existing ferry services in Eastern Canada and will look to procure 3 new modern ferries, including one for Marine Atlantic. Via Rail demande près de...
Via Rail is requesting almost $732 million in these main estimates as well. As our national passenger rail carrier, Via Rail's objective is to provide a safe, secure, efficient, reliable, and environmentally sustainable passenger service. In addition to trains that run through the Quebec City-Windsor corridor and long-haul trains between Toronto and Vancouver, and between Montreal and Halifax, this also includes passenger rail service to regional and remote communities, some of which have no access to alternative year-round transportation. In conclusion, the financial resources outlined in these main estimates will help these agencies, these Crown corporations and Transport Canada as well, to maintain and improve our transportation system. Our transportation system is vital for our economy and our quality of life. It's vital also for our safety and our security. And by making improvements to our transportation system, we're making it safer and more secure. And we're also creating good, well-paying jobs for the middle class and ensuring a better quality of life for all Canadians. I would now be happy to answer any questions, Madam Chair, you may have. Thank you.
Minister Garneau for that presentation. We'll go on now to 6 minutes. Ms. Block.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and I do want to thank you as well, Minister, and departmental staff for joining us today for the first hour of our committee. Where does one begin? With the opportunity to question you on the main estimates and the departmental reports on plans and priorities for the department, the Canadian Transportation Agency, as well as the Canadian Air Transport Security Authority. It feels like the field is wide open. At first blush, Minister, it would appear that you have been very busy. Yet a closer look reveals that whether we're looking at legislation you've introduced, regulations that have been gazetted, or the recent measures included in the Budget Implementation Act, much of the heavy lifting has been left to the department or industry itself. Take, for example, the numerous initiatives undertaken in the air industry. Consistently, we have heard that the cumulative effect of new flight duty time regulations, the Air Passenger Bill of Rights regulations, and most recently the creation of a new entity for security screening through the BIA, and the tight timelines in which industry must be ready, is overwhelming their capacity to implement these changes in a safe and seamless manner. On top of this, the industry is continuing to grapple with the recent grounding of their Boeing 737 MAX 8 aircraft and the subsequent changes that have had to be made by the airlines to continue providing safe air service to Canadians. And I just want to quote Mr. Bergamini when he was here at committee. Now, as our industry is grappling with major operational challenges stemming from the grounding of the MAX 8, the implementation of new flight duty times rules, and with the impossible task of complying by July 1st with prescriptive new passenger rights, we are again confronted with a government-imposed deadline and process, unquote. And he was referring to the measures in the BIA. Why, Minister, would you introduce this measure in the Budget Implementation Act at the end of a session, 5 months before an election, when the industry is already struggling on so many other fronts?
Thank you very much for that question. And I would like to say that there are a lot of things happening in the airline industry, and a lot of these we announced our intention to put into place, I would say, years ago. And in fact, there's been a very, very long process, the proper normal government process of consultation, of gazetting, and the time has come in certain cases to go to Canada Gazette 2 and put these regulations into effect. This hardly comes as a surprise to the industry that we have wanted to address the issue of pilot fatigue, something that started under, may I say, the Conservatives back in 2010 and didn't get done by 2015. We carried on with it and are now putting it in place. So it hardly comes as a surprise. Secondly, the issue of passenger rights, we made that very clear 3 years ago that we were going to proceed and come forward with that. We're also very adamant about issues related to accessibility for passengers. And these are all things that we have very clearly indicated we would go forward with and consulted with industry. And now the time has come to put them into effect. And we feel that the timeline that we are going to, in some cases, announce and in some cases has already announced are very reasonable.
So, Madam Chair, my question was about the measures in the BIA when it comes to creating a new entity for security screening. And given all of the other initiatives that the air industry is being asked to implement on very short timelines, I asked, why did you deem it necessary to introduce this measure in the BIA with yet again another very short timeline? It's our understanding that it needs to be implemented by January 1st of 2020. We're going into an election in the fall. Can you please explain why you included this measure in the Budget Implementation Act?
Because it's a measure that we feel very strongly about, making the current CATSA, turning it into a not-for-profit organization, much as we did with, or previous government did back in the 90s, in severing NAVCAN from Transport Canada, and that has turned out to be an extremely successful model. I will point out that there are differing opinions about this decision that was in the BIA. The airline industry has expressed what you have said. On the other hand, the airports where this is implemented feels very positive about the decision that we have taken to move ahead with this not-for-profit version of CATSA.
Hey, really quickly then, because I only have 45 seconds left, you have stated that flying in Canada has not become more affordable for flying in Canada has not become more affordable for Canadians, despite this being one of your Transportation 2030 goals. With half the price of an airline ticket from Ottawa to Toronto being the result of direct taxes and surcharges, why is your government making air travel in Canada even more expensive with the imposition of a carbon tax? And have you costed what the cost of a carbon tax will be on the airline industry?
We feel, of course, and this is a broader question, that it is important for us to address the issue of climate change. And, of course, we, through the Pan-Canadian framework, have given provinces the option of deciding how they would do it. For those that decided that they would not, there would be a backstop, and with respect to flying, fuel surcharges would be imposed for provinces in which the backstop applies, and where we're only addressing intra-provincial flying. We have not changed anything with interprovincial flying.
Thank you very much, Mr. Garneau. On to Mr. Badaway for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and welcome to our committee. Mr. Garneau, thank you for being here today. Mr. Garneau, I understand that you have just returned from the Economic Forum, the Great Lakes Economic Forum in Cleveland, Ohio. In your role, not only as a minister, but the chair of the Cabinet Committee on Canada, United States Relations, Trade Diversification, and Internal Trade. The question, and in particular as it relates to today's discussion with respect to the budget, is that there continues to be investments to strengthen trade corridors domestically here in Canada. Are you continuing to have discussions with our U.S. counterparts to integrate, communicate those domestic trade corridor investments, but also with that being done and completed, to ensure fluidity, to hopefully see that they're also integrating a lot of their trade corridor investments so that fluidity does flow over the border in a seamless fashion, whether it be by road, whether it be through the Great Lakes, by air, or by rail. And the reason why I asked the question is, and I know in my part, in our neck of the woods in Niagara, we see a lot of trade that's leaving our region, going into the States, and or, equally as important, if not more important, a lot of that trade is going through Niagara or coming from Niagara over the border, going into, for example, the Port of New York, Staten Island, Manhattan, other ports, and then going international. And therefore, the need to have that fluidity, especially when you're going over the border, whether it is road, rail, water, or air. Are those discussions happening?
In short, yes, and thank you for the question. The Great Lakes Economic Forum, which I attended yesterday, is, as you know, composed of 9 American states that border on the Great Lakes, as well as Ontario and Quebec. And this is a very useful forum because we all have a lot of things in common. And as you point out, looming large in those interests that we have in common is how we make the trade corridors as efficient as possible. We're talking about a region here that represents $6 trillion of economy and 100 million people. And there's an awful lot of products that are made that we want to get to the right place. St. Lawrence Seaway is an essential element of that. And as you point out, there is rail, but we have underexploited the maritime routing. And as you know, we in Canada are at the moment evaluating how we can make the St. Lawrence Seaway more efficient. It also, of course, goes through a region that you're very concerned about, the Niagara Peninsula, the Welland Canal. And we want to get more of the goods that are produced to markets in a quicker fashion. And the people that I met with, for example, the Port of Cleveland, and those 9 American states want to get their products. Now, yes, they can use rail, but they also feel, like we do, that we can do better with respect to maritime traffic. So that is something that we are talking about and that we share in common.
And the message to our American counterparts with respect to the USMCA, as well as Section 232, the tariffs, obviously with that seamless trade corridor being binational and then eventually with its final destination, most times internationally, is it very well understood by our counterparts on the U.S. side that while we're making those investments, there still is a need for the USMCA to be dealt with and the Section 232 of the tariffs to be dealt with in a positive fashion?
Yes, and that was one of the main messages that I carried yesterday to the audiences that I spoke to. Yes, we want to ratify the what we call the CUSMA, but at the same time there is a serious impediment, which is the steel and aluminum tariffs, and I made it very, very clear that this presented challenges for us here in Canada, and especially given the fact that we really only have about 5 to 6 weeks before Parliament rises. So they understand that very well. They understand the importance of finalizing and implementing NAFTA 2, and they share that commitment with us.
Madam Chair, is having to do with the Trade Corridors Fund, the National Trade Corridors Fund. What kind of successes are you seeing now based on the investments that you've already made, and what are your expectations in the future with the fund with respect to the returns on those investments?
Well, so far we have committed funding to 39 projects. Some of those projects are in construction at this point, and we feel that they are going to make our trade corridors more fluid. Some of them affect Great Lake ports like Thunder Bay and Hamilton. There's been funding put into both of those ports, and other measures to keep those corridors flowing as the goods flowing as well as possible. We are currently now in an open situation where we've got another $750 million, and we have, since the 15th of January, invited new submissions for consideration under the National Trade Corridors Fund. This is a highly solicited, it's extremely popular as a program to help do exactly what it says, which is to keep our corridors moving efficiently. Thank you.
Thank you very much. On to Monsieur Aubin.
Merci, Madame la Présidente. Toute rapide.
Thank you very much. A question very quickly, because I don't want to waste my time. Is there a public portion where I could actually table the motion that I announced last week?
At the end of this portion of the meeting and prior to starting the second, or at the beginning of the second portion, that's fine, Mr. Aubin.
Perfect for me. Bonjour, Monsieur le Ministre. Merci.
Hello, Minister. Thank you. It's always a pleasure to see you here, and I hope today that you'll be talking about green mobility, green transportation, and greenhouse gas reduction are your priorities. I see that there is $731 million that are being asked for. 435 is used for capital investments. What's that about exactly? Well, Via Rail is subsidized by the government. Not only the price of the part of the price of a ticket is subsidized, but they also have capital expenditure. They have equipment, they have rolling stock, and they have to maintain that rolling stock in terms of high-frequency trains. This is something we're considering, we're looking at, and I would say that is a distinct project. It's distinct from the regular day-to-day operations of Via Rail. I know you're interested in this. Yes, I am very interested in it. Okay, fine. I would have been disappointed if you hadn't asked a question on that. I even have a second question on that. Because there's nothing in the budget which talks about the high-frequency train, but I've talked to your colleagues at infrastructure saying that the project's moving forward quickly, even if there's nothing about it on the budget. Now, when you're finally convinced of the relevancy of this project, now, if we haven't actually spent all the money that are allocated for this project, will you make a decision? Are you going to wait for the budget to be spent? Well, we're doing due diligence, and I'm sure you'll understand that this is a project which is very, very complex in nature. We're talking about hundreds of kilometers. There are issues like, is it viable in terms of the number of passengers that might take the train? We don't want to subsidize these passengers beyond a specific amount. There are environmental issues as well. We must consult the indigenous peoples. We have to look to interoperability with the REM in Montreal. But if you get an answer before the end of the study, we make a decision. Well, we're working very, very hard on this. We're doing our due diligence to make sure that we can make the right decision. And you've reminded me week in, week out that this is something that I should not forget. Yes, I have. You're right, and I'll continue to do that. Let's move on to a different topic. In the budget, zero-emission vehicles are mentioned. 7 passenger and less vehicles. I was at a symposium recently on fuel cells and hydrogen fuel. Canada is quite behind in this area, apparently, especially in terms of hydrogen-powered trucks and buses. Could that be part of a second wave, a second project to deal with greenhouse gases to actually promote electrified or electric trucks? Now, are you thinking about doing that, or are you thinking about focusing on hydrogen-powered trucks and buses? Well, it's up to the market. The market will decide whether cars will be made available which meet the requirements in terms of subsidies. Now, one of the measures that wasn't mentioned or hasn't been mentioned as much, really, for those considering buying a car, companies are eligible to a tax deduction if they buy light or heavy vehicles. If they're hydrogen powered. Thanks for your answer. The last minute, I'd like to talk to you about CATSA very briefly. We know that all the security fees that are charged for security are not reinvested in security. This is like a cash cow for the government. Now, the privatization of security services, will it bring about advantages for regional airports like the one in Trois-Rivières, for example, who want a security services so they can develop, in fact, their air traffic? Well, one of the objectives we have is to reduce the cost for passengers. Of course, we have to pay for security and security services. It's users that pay for their own security. So people buying tickets pay for those security services, but we don't want it to be higher than it has to be. That's one of our goals. Now, in terms of regionals which don't currently have CATSA services in the bill, C-49, which is the modernization of the Transportation Act, we've said that airports are eligible for this, but at their cost, at their own cost. We might review designated airports, of course, but this isn't something that we're thinking about doing between now and June. Thank you very much.
Garneau, on to Mr. Iacono.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Thank you, Minister, for being here today as well. Our committee has worked on the impact of airline or airplane noise near airports which are causing problems for communities across the country, including in Laval. The report was tabled on the 19th of March last. And my question for you is the following. Do you have any comments to share with us on this issue? Well, thank you very much for your question. I recognize that transportation doesn't have an impact on ordinary Canadians' daily lives, including noise levels. Of course, these airports are economic hubs, but they must take into account the needs of surrounding communities. Now, in terms of the specific issue of noise from airports, this government is sensitive to people's concerns, to not only in the case of Montreal, but in the case of other airports across the country as well. So we're sensitive to that, and we're sensitive to the concerns of those living near airports as well. We're continuing to follow this very, very closely. Now, the management of airplane noise is complex, and it requires various levels of government to be involved, and various stakeholders in the airline industry have to be involved. So many stakeholders are involved in this. I'm encouraged to see that the level of focus of the industry on this issue, and the example I'll give you is the following. NAV Canada and the Greater Toronto Airport Authority have brought in experts, recognized experts. They've also brought in members of the public to find ways of reducing noise levels caused by aircraft using Toronto Airport. And they've committed openly to implement the majority of the recommendations put forward by this working group. So there'll be a report. And then, of course, that's based on consultations. Now, there are things we can do, of course, but all stakeholders have to work together to find ways of dealing with the issue. This is something I'm well aware of because it's something people mention to me on a constant basis. Now, rail transportation. Last March, you announced various appointments to Via Rail. Ms. Garneau, for example, who became CEO of Via Rail. Now, could you speak to the nomination process? And could you also tell us what Ms. Garneau's goals will be during her term? Well, the nomination process, of course, is a process whereby we go out and try and find the best person for the position. It's basically that, a person with experience and necessary qualifications to lead a major business with huge responsibilities. I'm very, very proud to see Ms. Cynthia Garneau take up the lead of Via Rail. In fact, she starts her job today, and I think the future looks good for Via Rail. Now, one of the major projects on her plate will be the renewal of rolling stock. There is a major investment. We're talking about the Quebec City-Windsor corridor here. So locomotives and the cars will be replaced starting in 2022. You'll start seeing the new cars on the rails. You'll start seeing also the new locomotives. That's a major project. It's also a major responsibility. Siemens won the tender, the bid, and they'll be providing the rolling stock that we're buying. Now, if we decide to go to put in place the high-frequency train, well, there'll be even more work for her to do. Starting on the 1st of May, there's a federal incentive encouraging people to buy zero-emission vehicles. That makes all the difference for Canadians who want to go green. One of the comments we hear often is the cost of these vehicles. In fact, in Quebec and in Laval, there are incentives for zero-emission vehicles already. This new incentive, is it something that you can claim at the same time as the incentives offered by municipalities and the provinces? Well, the answer to that is yes. As you know, we have our own list, which is available on Transport Canada's website, a list of eligible vehicles, that is. So So there's an incentive available of up to $5,000. So the province of Quebec also has an incentive of up to $8,000 as well. And as you've mentioned, the city of Laval is unique, in fact, because they're offering an incentive of up to $2,000. All that can be claimed together. But the vehicle that the person's buying must be on one of the three lists. So it can be on one list but not another. If they're on the three lists, the most common vehicles are, well, that means that the person can really benefit from a significant incentive. Third question, what are the forecasts for the sales of zero-emission vehicles for 2019, 2020? We don't have any forecasts. We hope that people will finally decide that it's time to make the shift to buy these zero-emission vehicles. It would be great to see many people buying these vehicles from the dealers. Thank you.
Mr. Rogers.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Minister and officials, for being here today. Minister, I want to focus on the issues of transportation pertaining to Newfoundland and Labrador, of course, which is predominantly done by flights or ferry service. Marine Atlantic provides an important constitutionally mandated ferry service to the citizens of my province. And recently we have been faced with challenges in terms of rates set by Marine Atlantic and the cost recovery rates, which some believe are too high. Many residents are concerned about the affordability of this important, crucially important ferry service to my province. Could you comment on the process undertaken to ensure the affordability of the constitutionally mandated service that we have?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Terrence. We try to achieve the right balance here. As you point out, Marine Atlantic service is vital to the interests of Newfoundland and Labrador, and for people who depend on it, not only for their own personal travel, but also for most of the goods that arrive and leave the island. Marine Atlantic brings more than a quarter of all visitors to Newfoundland, as well as 2/3 of all freight and 90% of perishables and time-sensitive goods. So, and we have a constitutional responsibility between the service from North Sydney to Port aux Basques. Marine Atlantic is, in fact, seeking $153 million for year-round constitutionally mandated ferry service between North Sydney, Nova Scotia, and Port aux Basques, as well as non-mandated seasonal service between North Sydney and Argentia. Budget 2019, as you know, mentioned that we're going to extend support for existing ferry services in Eastern Canada, and we will also be looking to procure 3 new ferries, but one of them for Marine Atlantic. So that would be in replacement of the Leif Erikson. I realize the service is still expensive. Our approach has been that we subsidize the constitutionally mandated one, and we aim to get 100% recovery on the non-mandated one. We feel that we've achieved the right balance, although perhaps not everybody agrees with that, but we're trying to do something that provides that service, but to do it and to allow the fleet to be modernized when the time comes. But at the same time, we also have to be mindful of the expenditures that are involved.
Well, I appreciate trying to find a balance in all of that, but the reality is there's a general sentiment right across the province, I think, from the business community, tourism operators, and others that the current rates are an impediment to people coming to the province. We've seen some drastic improvement in tourism in the province, but people still believe that affordability is an issue, and to suggest that the cost recovery rates may be something that we need to take a closer look at. The other, and I'm glad you mentioned the new ferry because I just wonder, how is that fleet renewal kind of approach going to impact the operations of Marine Atlantic and the services that it provides?
Well, we have people from Marine Atlantic here. In fact, Murray Hopman is here. Did you want to say anything?
Sure. It will actually not impact the service at all. When the new vessel comes into service, it will actually enhance the service. So we will have the existing fleet right up to the point when the new vessel comes into service. And then we will, at that point, we will dispose of the Leif Erikson. So it won't actually impact the service at all.
Positive from your perspective?
Extremely positive, yes.
Thank you very much. During our ongoing study on trade and transportation logistics, Minister, we have heard from witnesses such as the Atlantic Provinces Economic Council on the need to harmonize transportation regulations. And in Budget 2019, the Government of Canada announced that through the Road Safety Transfer Payment Program, it would support the provinces and territories in their efforts to harmonize road safety and transportation requirements. How does the government plan to support the provinces and territories, specifically in harmonizing these regulations regarding the weight and size of freight trucks?
I'll pass it over to my deputy minister, but you're right about the issue of trying to harmonize, because provinces have set their own rates with their own weight limits with respect to how they design their roads, or the kind of roads that they have to live with, the kind of ground conditions. So we are trying to improve that so that, if a truck is leaving from St. John's, Newfoundland, and is on its way to Victoria, British Columbia, that it doesn't have to stop along the way and unload, or in some cases there are also there have been tire problems as well. We're trying to, in order to improve internal trade in our country, find harmonization with respect to those rules that are under provincial jurisdiction. But I'll pass it to Deputy Minister Keenan.
Sure. As Minister Garneau said, there's a lot of work going on to work through this very technical issue, and Minister Garneau and his provincial colleagues, the Council of Ministers of Transport, commissioned a task force report on trucking harmonization. It came in early in 2019, and there's an interprovincial group on weights and measures that's been tasked with working through that and establishing priorities to actually harmonize these regs. One area where significant progress is being made is in single-wide tires, and we now have an agreement in principle with provinces to standardize the regulations with respect to single-wide tires, which the trucking industry is very keen to get rules that work across the country.
Thank you very much, Mr. Keenan. On to Mr. Glinsky.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to thank the Minister for being out and his staff. Madam Chair, I'd like to share my time with my colleague to the right, Mr. Lieber. But at this time, I'd like to move a motion on behalf of Matt Genereux, who's not here today. If I could, Madam Chair. That the committee invite the Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Indigenous Services to appear on the Minister's behalf to update the committee on the status of delivering infrastructure directly to Indigenous communities, including the doubling of the gas tax fund announced in Budget 2019, and that the meeting on this study, currently scheduled for Tuesday, May 28, 2019, be televised. And Madam Chair, I would like the vote recorded, please. Thank you.
No problem. Okay, any discussion? Ms. Block?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I'll be quick because I know we want to get back to questioning the minister. We know, as was discussed at our last meeting, that the Prime Minister provided a guideline for parliamentary secretaries which outlines their role and duties, one of which is to appear at committees if the minister can't make themselves available. And I know that the original motion inviting the minister was passed unanimously, so it is our hope that the parliamentary secretary asking the parliamentary secretary to appear in place of the minister will be supported by the members of the governing party. And that being said, I do support this motion. Thank you.
Just for the interest of the committee members, clerk has informed me that parliamentary secretaries, of course, do answer questions and can replace a minister. In many instances, it's not automatic. The clerk goes with the answer that's provided by the department, which from the department, it was the officials. So All right, any further discussion on this motion? All right, all those in. Okay, your call. Yes.
Mr. Badaway? No. Mr. Hardy?
No.
Mr. Iacono?
No.
Mr. Rogers? No. Mr. Fuhr?
No.
Ms. Block?
Yes.
Mr. Iglinski?
Yes.
Mr. Liepert? Monsieur Aubin? Yeas pour 4-4, nays contre 5-5.
Does not carry. All right, thank you very much. On to Mr. Liepert.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Minister, for being here. I just wanted to follow up a little bit more on the CATSA transfer. And I wanted to sort of, I'm not here to ask questions on behalf of the airlines, but we had some, I think, some quite compelling testimony over the last couple of meetings. And I won't repeat everything that my colleague mentioned in her initial question, but I do think you must have to admit, Minister, that while your comments, and I'm going to paraphrase them, were that this consultation has been going on for a long time. Really, all of the details of the Passenger Bill of Rights were only passed through in the last this session. These details around the CATSA transfer only really came to light in the BIA, and then of course the airlines have had to deal with something that was not anyone's fault, but the grounding of the MAX 8s. So I guess I'd like to just get a little more of an explanation of why it is so important to get this through as part of the Budget Implementation Act, rather than ensure that it's negotiated fairly and that at the end of the day the consumer is not going to be impacted negatively on this.
One of the main reasons we're putting this forward is to make things better for the consumer and more efficient, and we feel that taking the measures that we are taking will actually accomplish that objective. As I said, we had a lot of people who were very skeptical about when NAVCAN was separated from Transport Canada, and today people continue to use that as an example of a very wise decision taken by people 20 years ago. Now, it hasn't been officially on the radar screen, but this doesn't come as a surprise to either the airline industry or the airports. And by the way, again, the airports have been, and they're the ones who are also very close to this as well. They've been asking for this for a very long time, and we believe that the schedule that we've put forward is one that can be implemented. And I can understand the airlines because lots of things are happening, and I want to say I do sympathize on the issue of the MAX 8. Yep. This is totally unexpected. But I feel that when we make decisions about the implementation schedule, we look at it very carefully. We don't just throw out dates.
I don't know how much time I've got, but I just want to get clarification on another issue. The airlines seem to indicate that it was a done deal, that that there was a sale price actually attached to the assets. I believe it was one of your deputies at committee the other day said that was not the case, that it was that would still be negotiated. Can you elaborate a little further on where that stands today? Because it seems to us that if you actually sell those assets for more than $1, let's say, that the passenger is paying for those assets twice because they've already paid for them once. Could you elaborate a bit more on that?
Yeah, the Deputy Minister.
Okay.
Thank you.
2 points I could elaborate on here. One is that the purpose of the BI legislation is to authorize a negotiated transfer, and beyond that, it sets some basic terms, but everything is subject to negotiations with the airlines and the airports. And the airlines did express concerns here in committee and elsewhere. We've been talking with them, and and we've addressed their concerns to the point where they're ready to sit down with us next week and start those negotiations on a reform that's been in discussion in some manner or other since 2017. On the issue of the transfer price, it was the Director General of Air Policy was testifying. It's a subject to negotiations, and it is. The government's position going into those negotiations is that the appropriate price to transfer the assets is their book value in the government's accounts. And if you transfer them at book value, then it neither adds to or there's no surplus or there's no impact on the deficit. So it's neutral. The transfer is neutral in terms of the impact on current taxpayers versus current travelers. And so that's our position going into the negotiations. But this is all subject to a negotiation with the airports and the airlines, and the airports are ready, and the airlines told us yesterday that they would be ready to start those negotiations as early as next week.
But it seems like the passengers already paid for those assets, so I still don't understand how the government can make the claim that this is a straight across transfer, because that asset base was built up through fees that the paying public had paid for, and now the government is saying we're going to take that asset base, which the public has paid for, put it into general revenue, and we're going to charge you a second time. That doesn't make any sense.
Well, I would say that the assets that have been built up in CATSA are quite significant, and that they've been built up over a long period of time, over many years. And if you go back in the history of CATSA, sometimes it ran a big deficit and the government topped it up, and sometimes it ran a surplus. Sitting here today, there is a big overlap between taxpayers and passengers, because there's 13 million Canadians travel every year, and they're all taxpayers. And so sitting here today, the government's position at the beginning of negotiations is let's transfer it at a manner that is neutral between taxpayers and passengers. And if you don't do that, then you're either having a windfall for the government of Canada, or you're having a hit on the deficit, which makes it not neutral between taxpayers and passengers.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Keane. Mr. Hardy and Mr. Furr are sharing time. Mr. Furr, 2 minutes, and then on to Mr. Hardy.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Minister, thank you for coming this morning. And as you're aware, this committee recently tabled a report called Supporting Canadian Flight Schools. That came about as a result of my motion M177, which was supported unanimously in the House, 288-0, which is something that doesn't happen very often these days, as you are well aware. But I think that indicates that the House is very supportive, and by extension Canadians, on what this country is going to do about generating pilots. I also understand and appreciate that the department has 120 days to respond, which is going to get tight to how many days left we have in this sitting period. So in the event that that doesn't happen, although I really hope that it does, I was wondering if you could give us a little bit of feedback on what you thought of the report.
I thought it was excellent, and I want to thank the Transportation Committee, and I want to thank you for your motion to set this process in motion, and also to, as you know, mention the fact that Transport Canada is seized with this issue of the need for more pilots and more training in Canada because of the looming shortage, some of it which is being felt at this time. As you point out, we are currently looking at all of the recommendations from the Transportation Committee on this. It's my hope that we will be able to come forward, even though we have 120 days, so we will be able to. We're working very hard to do it before Parliament rises. This is an extremely valuable report. It helps us. It's, I think, a perfect example of the kind of thing that demonstrates how important it is to have a Transportation Committee because of the valuable input that they bring to helping different ministries do their job.
Thank you. I believe that's my 2 minutes. I'll pass.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Minister Garneau, trade corridors are obviously very important. I think you, your ministry, the whole government has recognized that. This committee has recognized that. Mr. Badaway and I initiated a study of the Niagara Trade Corridor and, of course, the West Coast Trade Corridor. You'll be pleased to know that the level of talk about collaboration between the component parts of the West Coast Trade Corridor has gone significantly up. I had the pleasure of attending a WestTAC conference a week ago, and they understand that they've got to do a better job of coordinating their activities and not just leave it to government to sort everything out. Having said that, I have a request rather than a question, and it has to do with that third Class 1 railway serving
Metro Vancouver's ports, and that's the Burlington Northern Santa Fe. That line continues to demonstrate difficulties with safe operation, with reliability. There was a washout just the other week that shut them down for 2 days. And of course capacity, because the rail line currently follows the shoreline through a residential area in White Rock, and there are obviously speed limitations. So the request is one that I'll actually repeat because we've made this before, is that we find, give or take, around $300,000 to co-fund with the regional municipalities and the province of British Columbia a study to relocate that BSNF line off of the waterfront, opening up obviously better trade movement, as well as the the possibility of high-speed rail service down the Cascadia corridor. I'll leave that with you, sir, but if you have a question to or a comment to make, please do so.
Well, thank you very much, and but I would also add that I would encourage Surrey, to the city of Surrey, to continue to apply through the National Trade Corridors Fund for funding for this study. This is an eligible project. It hasn't happened yet, but I would encourage them to persist and to come forward with it's open anytime for them to put their submission in.
All right, thank you very much. Okay, thank you to everyone. Now I have to read out the following. Pursuant to Standing Order 81-4, the committee will now dispose of the main estimates for the fiscal year ending March 31st, 2020. Votes 1 and 5 under Canadian Air Transport Security Authority. Vote 1 under Canadian Transportation Agencies. Votes 1, 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45, and 50 under Department of Transport. Vote 1 under Marine Atlantic, and vote 1 under Via Rail Canada. Do I have unanimous consent to deal with all of the votes in one motion? Yes. Yes, thank you very much. Shall all these votes of the main estimates 2019-20 carry? On division. Okay, on division. Shall I report these votes to the House? Yes. Yes, thank you. So thank you all very much. Minister Garneau and your officials, great seeing you again. We've seen a lot of you in this last 3.5 years, so thank you all very much. Have a wonderful day. We will suspend for a moment, and then when we come back, we will deal with Mr. Aubin's request and Mr. Kamick's motion. Back to order. Before we go on to the other work that we have to do, I had indicated to Mr. Alban that he had a motion that he wanted to entertain that is appropriately before us, Madam Clerk. All right, do all the members have a copy of this? Okay. Would you like to speak to it briefly, Mr. Alban?
Oui, je vais être assez bref.
I'll be very, very brief, because I think I've talked to the substance of this motion at the last committee. I'm a bit surprised by the previous vote. However, this is not doesn't stem from any particular request, but I don't think that we're engaging in partisan politics when we ask a minister to come before us, are we? With all respect I have for public servants, they are the ones that carry out the orders, but those who give the orders are politicians. In the absence of a minister, no matter what the reason for his absence, we should be able to meet the parliamentary secretary. I think that would be logical because the discussion we'll have is on the vision of those who actually give the orders, who set the vision, if you like, for any number of reasons. It's quite possible that the parliamentary secretary not be available, but at least, Madam Chair, I'd like you and the clerk to have the freedom to convene the parliamentary secretary so that we can actually reach our goal, which is to have a discussion with those who actually make the decisions, right? I don't think I need to reread my motion. I think it speaks for itself. That's all I have to say on the issue.
Any discussion? All right. All those, would you like a recorded vote or? Okay, Madam Chair.
Mr. Badaway.
Yes.
Mr. Hardy.
Yes.
Mr. Iacono.
Oui.
Mr. Graham.
Yeah.
Mr. Rogers.
Yes.
Mr. Kimmich. Mr. Iglinski.
Yes.
Mr. Leipert.
Yes.
Monsieur Aubin.
Oui. Et merci.
Yeas pour 9-9.
Good. It passes. Yes.
In light of approving this motion now, it would seem to me that that it should be automatic that the motion that we asked for earlier wouldn't even require a motion, that since the earlier motion asked for the minister and the minister wasn't available, we've now passed a motion that says the parliamentary secretary should appear. I would ask you as chair to reconsider whether or not we have the ability to move forward with the original motion and have the parliamentary secretary appear as was asked for in this motion.
It's my understanding we have already decided that, but just as a point, the particular date as well that Mr. General had put in his motion would not have been possible to do that. But the committee has already decided that at a previous meeting, and so we're not going to go back and reconsider it. So, thank you. All right, on to the Department of Transport. So we're studying now the temporary use in Canada by Canadians of American-plated vehicles, brought to us by Mr. Kimmich, who's been working on it for some time, and committee was kind enough to give Mr. Kimmich some time to introduce his motion and to put it on the table. And we were happy to be able to accommodate that. So as witnesses, we have the Department of Transport, Michael DeJong, Director General Multimodal Strategies and Program Integration, and Mario Demers, Chief Importation and Audit Inspection. From the Department of Finance, Carlos Acadina, Senior Director, Sales Tax Division, Tax Policy Branch, and Scott Winter, Director, Trade and Tariff Policy, International Trade Policy Division, International Trade and Finance. And with the Canada Border Services Agency, we have Andrew Lawrence, Acting Director General, Travelers Branch for the Canadian Snowbird Association, and Evan Rakowski, Director, Research and Communication, and as an individual by video conference from Calgary, Alberta, Tim Reed. Welcome to all of you. We're pleased to have you with us today. We'll start off with Department of Transport, please.
Thank you. Merci, Madame la Présidente, membre du...
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you to the members of the committee for giving me the opportunity to talk about the temporary use of American-plated vehicles in Canada by Canadian citizens.
With Transport Canada, I would just like to take the opportunity to introduce my colleague Mario Demers, who's the Chief of Importation at Transport Canada, and I would just briefly describe the current rules that apply to the importation of American-plated vehicles and provide a brief update on measures underway to improve this process. With respect to the current process, the Motor Vehicle Safety Act allows for vehicles purchased in the U.S. to be imported to Canada if they comply with the Canadian Motor Vehicle Safety Standards. These standards set out minimum safety requirements to protect the traveling public, such as lighting and braking requirements and steering controls. The Act also allows American-plated vehicles to be imported to Canada if the vehicle complies with the equivalent U.S. standards, the U.S. Federal Motor Vehicle Safety Standards, and that the vehicle can be updated to comply with Canadian rules. Both countries' motor vehicle safety standards are very closely aligned, But Transport Canada does have unique requirements in areas with proven safety benefits. For example, the Canadian standards include requirements for daytime running lights, manual transmission clutch interlock, anti-theft immobilizer equipment. Transport Canada manages the importation process through the Registrar of Imported Vehicles, or RIV. Under this process, an importer must confirm that their vehicle has no outstanding recalls and submit proof to the RIV before importation. Once in Canada, after paying the RIV fee, the RIV will tell the importer to present the vehicle for a final federal standards inspection. Before the inspection, the importer must make any modifications needed to bring U.S. vehicles into compliance with Canadian requirements. The RIV is funded through user fees charged to Canadian importers of vehicles brought into the U.S. The fee pays for a series of tasks and services, such as pre-purchase compliance verification, importation documentation, tracking, and final notification to provincial vehicle registration authorities. The RIV also operates 7 days a week and operates 500 stations of an inspection network. In the case of a temporary importation, the current safety regulations provide allowances for vehicles that do not meet Canadian safety standards. For example, these allowances cover circumstances that involve testing vehicles, evaluations, or evaluating new safety features. To facilitate tourism and cross-border movement, U.S. citizens are allowed to temporarily import and export U.S. vehicles, including rental vehicles. The same is true for Canadian citizens exporting and importing Canadian vehicles, licensed vehicles. Currently, the existing safety regulations do not permit a Canadian citizen to temporarily import a U.S. registered vehicle into Canada. Rather, the vehicle must be imported on a permanent basis. This is identical to U.S. law, which prevents a U.S. citizen from temporarily importing a Canadian registered vehicle to the U.S. The federal safety regulations are currently based on an assumption that a Canadian importing a U.S. registered vehicle is doing so on a permanent basis. Transport Canada recognizes that this is not always the case. As such, the department is working to amend the safety regulations to allow for temporary importation of U.S. vehicles by a Canadian citizen when it is clear that the vehicle will be returning to the U.S. These regulatory amendments are underway. As part of these regulatory amendments, there would not be any RIV fees applied to temporary importation of U.S. plated vehicles into Canada. These proposed amendments were pre-published in Canada Gazette Part 1 on May 19, 2018. And building on this progress, the department is aiming to finalize the amendments and seek final approval, final publication in Canada Gazette Part 2 by the end of this calendar year 2019. Pending final publication, Canadian citizens would immediately be able to apply to Transport Canada with no registration fees for a permit to temporarily import a U.S. registered vehicle into Canada. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jung. On to the Department of Finance, please.
Well, good afternoon. Thank you, Madam Chair, and members of the committee for inviting us here today to speak with you. My name is Scott Winter. I'm the Director of Trade and Tariff Policy at the Department of Finance. I'm joined today by my colleague, Mr. Carlos Achidina, as the Senior Director, Sales Tax Division. I'd like to begin today by explaining the general policy goals of Canada's tariff regime and the Goods and Services Tax, the GST, followed by a short description of the treatment of imported vehicles, including on a temporary basis, and how this treatment fits with those goals. Customs duties are established under the customs tariff legislation and applied on imported goods where applicable for a variety of policy reasons, including domestic industry protection as well as revenue generation. The GST is Canada's national sales tax. It is a broad-based tax that applies to most goods and services required for consumption in Canada. The GST is generally levied on imported goods in the same manner as it is imposed on domestic purchases, in order that the imported goods do not benefit from a tax-based competitive advantage over the goods that are sold in Canada. In light of these considerations and principles, Canadian residents who import a vehicle into Canada are required to pay applicable import duties and taxes at the time of importation. There are certain exceptions to the general rule that customs duties and the GST apply to the importation of vehicles, including for those imported on a temporary basis. For example, customs duties and the GST do not apply to vehicles temporarily imported by Canadian residents for the purpose of transporting their own household or personal effects into or out of Canada, or as a result of an emergency or unforeseen contingency. Subject to conditions specified by regulation, Canadian residents are also able to temporarily import, free of customs duties and GST, a foreign registered vehicle to reach their destination in Canada and return directly to a point outside of Canada within 30 days. However, the vehicle may not be used for other personal reasons while it is in Canada. The current framework was designed with the broad policy goals of avoiding competitive disadvantages or inequities for Canadian businesses, for example, vehicle dealers in Canadian border communities, as well as minimizing the risks of duty and tax avoidance that could negatively affect government revenues and create an uneven playing field for Canadian businesses. The collection and administration of customs duties and the GST on imported goods, as well as the exceptions for temporarily imported vehicles that I mentioned, fall under the responsibility of Canada Border Services Agency, CBSA, and my colleague from the CBSA will outline how the agency currently applies and administers the customs duties and GST on temporary importations of vehicles. Thank you once again for allowing us the opportunity to speak today, and we welcome any follow-up questions that the committee may have.
Thank you very much, Mr. Winter. On to Mr. Lawrence.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. As the committee is aware, the agency's mandate is complex and dynamic. It manages the border. We administer and enforces over 90 acts and regulations on behalf of other federal government departments, the provinces, as well as territories. With respect to this study on the feasibility of allowing Canadians to bring their legally owned and U.S. registered and plated passenger vehicles into Canada for a defined temporary period without having to pay any taxes, duties, or importation fees, the CBSA can only speak to its enforcement of the legislation as it applies to the border. The CBSA first derives its authorities to examine, detain, and or refuse entry to any good or conveyance, as is the case, a vehicle, under the Customs Act, one of the agency's primary pieces of legislation. When a Canadian resident is seeking to return to Canada with their U.S.-plated passenger vehicle, and they approach a land border port of entry, a border service officer must consider a number of acts and regulations before the vehicle may be admitted to the country. Firstly, vehicles imported into Canada must meet the requirements set by Transport Canada under the Motor Vehicle Safety Act. The CBSA assists Transport Canada by ensuring that these vehicles can be imported and will prohibit the entry of inadmissible vehicles. Secondly, with its broad food, plant, and animal authorities, the CBSA will inspect motor vehicles entering Canada to ensure they are clean and free of pests, soil, or other organic material. And vehicles found to be contaminated are refused entry and ordered removed from Canada under the authorities of the Plant Protection Act and the Health of Animals Act and their associated regulations. Thirdly, on behalf of Environment and Climate Change Canada, the CBSA may, on ECC request, detain shipments suspected of noncompliance pursuant to the Canadian Environmental Protection Act of 1999. Finally, on behalf of the Department of Finance, the CBSA must ensure that residents of Canada operating vehicles for which duties and taxes have not been paid are in compliance with the strict conditions set out in the Customs Tariff, Item 9802, and the regulations respecting temporary importation of conveyances by residents of Canada. Vehicles imported temporarily will be on a duty and tax-free basis so long as the conditions under the regulations are respected. For those vehicles that are admissible to Canada and which will be imported on a permanent basis, the CBSA must then assess the duty, excise tax, and goods and services tax owed to the Crown. It should be noted that in situations of emergency or unforeseen circumstances, Canadian residents may, under these regulations, be permitted to temporarily import non-compliant vehicles. Currently, the processing of foreign registered vehicles is paper-based, and the CBSA does not track statistics or data related specifically to the subset of the population the committee is examining. I hope I have clarified the CBSA's border enforcement role with respect to the temporary importation of vehicles by Canadian residents, and I would be happy to take any questions the committee may have. Thank you.
Thank you. Now on to the Canadian Snowbird Association. Evan Murkowski, please.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. Thank you for inviting me here today to discuss the issue of Canadian residents temporarily using American-plated vehicles in Canada. My name is Evan Murkowski. I am the Director of Research and Communications at the Canadian Snowbird Association. For the members of the committee who are not familiar with our organization, let me provide you with a brief overview. Founded in 1992, the Canadian Snowbird Association is a national, nonpartisan, not-for-profit advocacy organization dedicated to actively defending and improving the rights and privileges of Canadian travelers. Today, the CSA has grown to over 110,000 members from every province and territory in Canada. To fulfill our mandate and provide meaningful results for our members, our association delivers timely travel-related information for our membership and works with government at all levels to pursue policies for the betterment of Canadian travelers. We provide our members with not only up-to-date information, but we also have a government relations program which is wide-ranging and includes the defense of the Canada Health Act, namely the portability principle, provincial and territorial drug program vacation supply policies, residency requirements related to continuous health coverage, and a number of cross-border issues.
The interpreters are having a hard time keeping up.
Of course.
Thank you.
In regards to the latter, most recently the CSA has been actively tracking the development and implementation of the Entry-Exit Initiative, the information sharing program between Canada and the United States, which is scheduled to become fully operational by the end of this year. The Entry-Exit Initiative is one program in the broader Beyond the Border Declaration, which was unveiled in February 2011, which aims to enhance the collective security and accelerate the flow of legitimate goods, services, and people both at and beyond the Canada-US border. Another cross-border matter which impacts our membership and is the current subject of study for this committee relates to Canadian residents temporarily using American-plated vehicles while in Canada. Under the current legislative and regulatory framework, Canadian residents are only allowed to bring temporarily into Canada a foreign-plated vehicle for the purposes of transporting household or personal effects into or out of Canada for up to 30 days. In all other circumstances, if you buy, lease, rent, or borrow a vehicle while outside of Canada, Transport Canada and Border Services legislation does not allow you to bring a vehicle into Canada for your personal use, even temporarily, unless it meets all Transport Canada requirements and you pay the duty and federal taxes that apply. In our opinion, the current arrangement is outdated and it does not reflect the growing trend in both countries towards making the border experience as seamless and as timely as possible for low-risk travelers. This policy ought to be modernized because in its current form, it places an unnecessary restriction on the travel options of Canadian travelers who own U.S. registered vehicles. Over 60% of our members drive from Canada to their winter destination annually. Generally, as snowbirds age, they opt to fly back and forth from Canada to the United States rather than tolerate the multi-day drive to their winter residence. In order to have a mode of transportation while they are down south, many of them will purchase a U.S.-plated vehicle. This is permitted in all Sunbelt states, particularly Florida, Arizona, California, and Texas, and vehicles can be registered and insured with a Canadian driver's license. In certain instances, these Canadian travelers may be required to return to Canada in their U.S.-plated vehicles, and under current legislation, if they cannot satisfy the existing exemption, these individuals would be required to import the vehicle through the RIV program, it's the Registrar of Imported Vehicles program, and pay the necessary import duties, taxes, and program fees. These requirements make sense for vehicle owners who reside in Canada for most of the year, but seem excessive for owners of U.S.-plated vehicles who reside in the United States for up to 6 months annually and eventually intend to sell the vehicle in the United States. Once again, I would like to thank the committee members for their invitation, and I'm happy to take any questions you may have.
Thank you very much. Now, as an individual, we have Mr. Reid. Welcome to our committee, Mr. Reid.
Thank you, Madam Chair and committee members, and for being invited to address you. I'd also like to thank my MP, Tom Kimmick, for his attendance and his valued support for this cause, along with Mr. Badaway for his interest in the item. By way of background, like hundreds of thousands of Canadians, my wife and I own a retirement home in the U.S. We also own 2 vehicles purchased and registered in the state of Arizona. Following purchasing those vehicles, I was surprised to learn that we would not be able to bring them into Canada for a temporary period. The only way under existing legislation, which I understand to be the Motor Vehicle Safety Act, would be to apply to permanently import the vehicle, as you've just heard from several other speakers. It would seem the Motor Vehicle Safety Act, given its title and its preamble, exists primarily for safety reasons. But while laudable and necessary, it seems the Act would not apply to a U.S. citizen wishing to bring their vehicle into Canada temporarily. Indeed, we see this by the tens of thousands, I suspect, at the border crossings. Now, while the legislation deals at length with the permanent importation of vehicles, I have to assume when the legislation was passed, it had not been conceived that a Canadian citizen would own a vehicle in the U.S. and wish to bring it temporarily into Canada. This results in the ludicrous situation where a U.S. citizen, in this instance, enjoys more rights in Canada than a Canadian citizen. So why should a Canadian citizen wish to bring their vehicle temporarily into Canada? In our own circumstances, one of our vehicles happens to be a convertible sports car, which we would, on the occasional year, like to enjoy for several summer months on the roads in Canada. Another example, which my wife and I encountered, was a proposal from Australian friends of ours to join us at our property in the U.S., take a scenic drive north through the U.S. and through Western Canada, from where they would return to Australia from Canada by air, and we would depart back to the U.S. with our van. As it turns out, the only way that was possible was through a costly car rental. As a result, our proposed road trip was canceled. Interestingly, under this legislation, we would have been able to bring a rental car into Canada, but not our own. This begs the question, why does a U.S.-based rental car company enjoy this right while Canadian citizens does not? In another instance, my brother-in-law, unaware of these restrictions, intended to trailer his off-road vehicle temporarily into Canada, but was prohibited from crossing with it at the border. He had to leave the vehicle on the U.S. side of the border, drive to his home in Calgary, process paperwork to have it permanently registered in Canada, return to pick up the vehicle, and then return it several months later to leave it permanently back in the U.S. Well, these are actual occurrences. One can easily imagine other scenarios too. For instance, should a Canadian citizen with their own U.S. registered vehicle need to urgently return to Canada, but be unable to fly, perhaps due to health reasons, unable to book or afford an airline flight, or perhaps air traffic being grounded, they're further stymied from, well, let me just say, I had understood that they would be further stymied from driving their own vehicle. Now, we've just heard that in cases of emergency, Canadian citizens could bring their vehicles back. I was unaware of that. For almost 5 years now, I've been investigating and communicating with government officials about this issue. During this time, a Department of Transport employee raised the problem of ensuring a vehicle brought into Canada temporarily actually leaves the country. One might ask the same question about a U.S. citizen. Notwithstanding, I had offered a simple and easily implemented process to deal with this issue. As my time in front of you is limited, and this is meeting concerns a legislative problem, not an implementation challenge, I will defer going through this procedure I had suggested. Although for your reference, you may find my, excuse me, you'll find my suggestion in copies of letters to Minister Garneau dated in January and September of 2016. In 2017, Mr. Kamick kindly offered to support a petition to Parliament concerning this issue. I was advised at that time that as few as 25 original signatures of Canadian citizens would suffice. Excuse me. When this situation was explained to those petitions, not a single person declined to sign. I had easily gathered 100 signatures. Many of these individuals also own property in the U.S., and many of those also own vehicles in the U.S. It is safe to say that most were aghast to learn of the restrictions on their right. Excuse me again. Mr. Kimick has subsequently read and entered our petition in Parliament in 2017. In summary, I'm asking the committee to initiate the process of having this oversight and legislation corrected, thus restoring the rights of Canadian citizens, which have been inadvertently eliminated for no apparent reason. It is gratifying to see officials from various departments of the civil service in attendance. I am myself a retired corporate executive from the private sector with a long career in administrative functions. As such, I can fully appreciate the importance of administrative process when it comes to implementing policy, or in this case, legislation. However, as I fully know from my own career, process and administration follow policy and not vice versa. I acknowledge that this issue affects a very small part of our population. However, I ask, what is the calculus for deciding when to disregard a citizen's rights? As parliamentarians, I trust in your judgment to do what is right, regardless of the number of Canadians affected. Thank you for your attention. And I can take questions too.
Thank you very much, Mr. Reid. And Mr. Reid's documents are currently in translation. Hence be the reason you have not received them as of yet. Okay, Mr. Kimmick, it's on to your time. 6 minutes, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So again, I want to just thank the committee members and the government side especially for making this possible. This, as you've heard from my constituent, from the great riding of Calgary Shepherd, not the greatest, great riding. I know everybody's going to correct me next to it. It's taken 5 years to get to this point where I could get a committee hearing. So that's the nice part. Thank you for all of you also for being here. I know we've picked you out of your departments on a weekday to present on what is, and I admit to it, and so did Mr. Reid admit to it, it's a very niche, small issue. But when, and now I'm going to go into the more negative aspect of it, but I have all the correspondence here that back and forth between the minister's office that Mr. Reid has given me, as well as the petition response that I got, which was very unsatisfactory. This is what happens when issues like this are not dealt with immediately, when a resident of Canada raises an issue of private property, raises an issue that is very technical in nature. So I want to go to the question for you, Mr. John. You said you are waiting. I think end of year you mentioned there would be changes to the Motor Vehicle Safety Act regulations that will allow Canadians then to import their American plated vehicle temporarily, but they first have to seek a permit. Is my understanding? So you wouldn't just be able to show up at the border. You'd apply for a permit ahead of time with the Canadian government, and you would, I guess, fill it out with the license plate information. Can you tell me more about how that will actually function?
Okay, I'll start with just simply confirming the process, and I'll turn to my colleague Mario to talk about the specific permit involved. But yes, so there is a regulatory process that is now underway to remove the RIV fees, or the Registrar of Imported Vehicle fees, associated with temporarily importing a U.S. plated vehicle into Canada by a Canadian citizen. So yes, there is a process still for this about respecting the safety requirements in the Motor Vehicle Safety Act. And Mario? Sure.
So just to expand on that, currently there are allowances for temporary importation, and the changes in the regulation will be put into effect by the end of this year, and Gazette 2 are to expand on that. And what's being added is an ability to do exactly what we're discussing today, to temporarily import a U.S. registered vehicle. So currently there's a form online, or you can also get a paper form by reaching out to Transport Canada. But basically by providing basic information, vehicle information, the VIN of the vehicle, make, model, year, date of importation, how long you think you're going to be here, and the purposes for. And Transport Canada will then issue you an authorization certificate that you present to CBSA at the time of entry to demonstrate that you've already cleared this as a temporary importation, not a permanent importation, and therefore you are not to be sent to the RIV program and have to pay a RIV fee and so on, have your vehicle modified. So it just clearly identifies, and when you get to the border with this sheet, CBSA understands it's been reviewed and approved by Transport.
So you heard Mr. Reid's example, bringing up a vehicle from Arizona temporarily. He thereafter will be able to apply for the permit and bring up that vehicle for, say, 30 days and bring it back. I have another example from other constituents who mentioned it. Let's say I have a cottage or just a cabin in Montana, and I have a Jeep that I use for off-roading. That's the example I used at committee. I have a Jeep I use from off-roading. I then want to bring my Jeep to, say, I live in Lethbridge because I have a garage there, and to fix it up. Maybe I damage it while I'm off-roading. I understand from Mr. Lawrence I have to wash my Jeep to make sure it's clean. So thank you for that, because I probably wouldn't have done so. I will wash my Jeep then, show up at the border with the permit, and I would then also be allowed entry. What if my vehicle was non-functional? It's my vehicle. I'm taking it on a trailer across the border with with Canadian vehicle, and I'm trying to go to my garage to fix my vehicle. I'm handy. I'm a tinkerer. I'm making an upgrade to it, or it needs a new timing belt or work on its transmission. Can I still do so, even though it's non-functional, the vehicle?
The condition of the vehicle is not a distinguishing factor for being allowed in or not, depending on what this vehicle is, because again, we don't enforce and regulate on the intended use of the vehicle. So if you have like a Jeep Cherokee, for example, and you say, oh, I know it's a road vehicle and it's a regulated vehicle, but I never use it on the road, that vehicle is still a regulated vehicle and has to meet standards. However, if it is a true off-road vehicle, a UTV, an ATV, there are, again, basic things, and if you bring it in temporarily, it's a non-issue.
Okay, so then I had another question. Under this model that you're proposing here, does it match with, I guess the permit part doesn't match, but and the fees, will all fees then be waived for that time period? And what will happen if you overstay? So you have a permit, like I don't know how long the permit is good for.
So the Transport Canada permit currently is what we call a Schedule 7 or a TIVIS, and basically it allows for periods for 1 year or longer with justifiable reasoning. But typically for temporary importation by a Canadian of a U.S. plated vehicle, the periods will not typically be that long. It's a month, 3 months, 6 months kind of thing. And those vehicles, the form is quick and easy. It's a series of about 9 or 10 questions, very basic questions. You receive your certificate and you enter. There are no fees associated with temporary importation at all, only for permanent importation.
Okay.
On to Mr. Badaway.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, folks, for being here today. Much appreciated, as well as I want to thank you for the work that you've done in this file for the past, I'm sure, little while. I also want to thank Mr. Kmitsch for bringing this forward. Although a niche area, and I'm sure only affects a few individuals throughout the country, 1, 100, 1,000, a million is important. So I thank you for that. And I also want to thank you for bringing the motion that was unanimously supported. You weren't here at the last meeting when I brought up my amendment to that or change of motion, and I just wanted to make it clear that the reason why I did that was to try and expedite this for you, to ensure that although sometimes we sit on both different sides of the table, that we are in fact working together in the best interest of individuals like the individuals that I'm sure you've discussed this issue with for many months. So I guess my question is going to be very simple. I'm going to be very short, Madam Chair. Is to Mr. Kmitsch, is what you brought forward now and the work that's being done. It's been very well articulated by the department that they're working to amend the safety regulations. You've set a time frame that the proposed amendments, although pre-published in Canada Gazette 1 on May 19th of 2018, that the intent is now, pending final publication, to have this done by the year end. And then, of course, a lot of these issues would be dealt with and sort of put to rest, so to speak. So my question, again, to Mr. Kmitsch is are you satisfied with the direction that the committee's or the department's actually taking?
Answer as usual, I'm not a witness. Oh, fantastic. Yeah, I think that's great as long as it actually falls through Canada Gazette 2. I only had a couple more procedures questions I was wondering.
And Mr. Kmitsch, I'll give you that time.
Yeah.
You go ahead.
Oh, okay. Fantastic. Thank you, Mr. Bandaway. Mr. Lawrence, how involved has CBSA been with this permit process? Because you said that right now it's a paper-based record keeping on vehicles crossing into Canada. Is this just another piece of paper that border agents are going to be collecting, or is there some electronic communication that will happen between the two departments at some point? Because you're creating a new paper-based record.
No, it's an existing one.
It's an existing one.
We just expanded it to add one more purpose, which is this.
But it's a paper I would have to print or show on my electronic device at the border?
For personal importation, yes. There's if you've heard of the Single Window Initiative, it has to do with commercial importation, so that's electronic. But for personal importation, it is still a paper process, yes.
I would still have to print it. I could not show it on my phone if I have the document there.
No, you cannot show it on your phone.
So I guess that's kind of odd, isn't it? Like you said, you had a paper-based system. You're making me do it electronically and then print it so I could show it to Mr. Lawrence's CBSA officers at the border.
So if I could clarify, the paper that I referred to was a temporary import permit. It's a separate administrative document. They're not used in all cases of an importation, a temporary importation of a vehicle.
Okay, and then so how fast will CBSA officers be aware that, in fact, after this passes Canada Gazette 2, like how fast will people actually know across your agency that Canadians with American plated vehicles can bring them in temporarily? Like how's that training going to be rolled out?
So part of my role is to provide the frontline functional guidance in matters related to regulatory change and policy change. So we have a process set up whereby we would issue what's called a shift briefing and an operational bulletin. It will reference back to the various authorities governed by transport, and step-by-step instructions will be issued to the frontline staff. so that they understand what the form looks like, how it's applied for, what it means in terms of the application of the various requirements at the border.
And I guess the question back to you, Mr. Chong, Mr. Demers, is what happens when a Canadian, I guess, overstays? The time period for these permits will be how long?
Again, it's on a case-by-case basis. And when they apply, for example, if someone applies and says, I'd like to be bringing my vehicle in for 3 months, and something happens and 3 months become 4 months, they can simply contact Transport Canada and say, permit number such and such, I had stated 3 months, I need a little bit longer period, and as long as it's a valid reason, the permit is extended.
Okay, and then I guess my next question is, so this is all fees, all import fees, GST, customs. There will be no fees for Canadians bringing in their property, their vehicle across the border if it's American plated.
From Transport Canada's perspective, yes.
So specifically, the reference was for Transport Canada Registrar of Imported Vehicle fees, those fees in particular, correct?
Yeah.
So there'll still be that AC fee?
Importation.
Okay. Right, those are all. I'm satisfied. Like they're
Good.
actually going to do it. I'm pleased that Peaches end on a very tight timeline too by end of December. So
Yes, exactly. Monsieur Aubin.
finish it.
Yes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I've never felt that Trois-Rivières was as far as it is from the border as it is today. This is an issue I've never had to deal with in 8 years in Parliament. I think there are two ways of learning. You can ask questions or you can listen. Now, I think that the questions I'm about to ask are very, very basic. This is a niche issue, so I would voluntarily give up my time. Now, I know that he wanted 2 meetings on this issue. I think between Mr. Badaway giving him time and me giving him time, we'll manage to do everything in one shot. Thank you very much, Mr. Aubin. Thanks for giving up your time. I know that this is a very specific topic, a very specific issue to my constituent.
7. There was an acronym I think used, TIBIS.
That's the electronic online system. It stands for Temporary Vehicle Importation System. So people have the option. Those that have a computer can log on and complete all the information. It's automatically reviewed and processed by Transport Canada officials, and then they will respond again electronically with a here's your authorization.
Just so I can have the certainty that this for sure will be done by end of year, because I've seen things gazetted before, and then the consultation process is prolonged, and then it just kind of disappears and dies off on the paper. Is there a fixed date by which you believe it'll be gazetted for the second time and final time? And is there a fixed day to make this operational?
So it has been gazetted for the first time, pre-published in May 2018. The second date, the final publication, is not fixed. So this would be subject to decisions by the Minister of Transport, subject to approvals from Treasury Board ministers. The department is aiming to finalize and to seek approval for the final regulations by end of this calendar year, 2019.
My only problem is there's an election. Elections tend to, for all these niche issues, to just kind of disappear. Is this part of, every single department has a regulatory plan. Is this part of the regulatory plan as well?
It is part of our forward regulatory plan. It can be found in the regulations being referred to for regulations to amend the motor vehicle safety regulations on importation and national safety marks.
Okay. And if this isn't done in 2019, and in the next parliament, if my constituents are okay with me returning here, are you okay to return to this reconstituted committee in the next parliament to explain why it wasn't done?
Certainly happy to return.
All of us do. Yeah. Thank you.
Mr. Graham.
If the interpreters had problems with Mr. Rakovetsky, then they'll have real issues with me, so sorry about that. I'm trying to get my... I appreciate Mr. O'Brien's comments that this is new to him, it's new to me as well, so thank you, Mr. Committee, for bringing this. This is more interesting than I expected it to be. It is, it really is. But I'm trying to get my mind around what a temporary importation is, because as I understand it, if you cross the border, you're temporarily importing a vehicle. straight up, as soon as you cross the border in a vehicle. In the eyes of the law, you're temporarily importing. Is that correct?
I guess as soon as you're crossing the border, you are importing the clothes on your back even. So when it comes to vehicle, you're importing. Now, the matter of the fact is, it's at that time you have to declare to customs, is this a permanent importation or is this a temporary importation?
Okay.
And based on that decision, then there's different process flows that apply.
Okay, so you said there's a 30-day, so you can bring in a vehicle to the other country, stay for 30 days, as long as you only go to your destination. So are you in a technical violation if you go to the grocery store in the other country?
That I'm going to have to defer to CBSA because the 30-day and the not use is the CBSA criteria.
Yeah, so just to clarify, the 30 days is outlined in the customs tariff, tariff item 9802, and it outlines the conditions under which you can, a resident of Canada may import temporarily a vehicle. The conditions are up to 30 days. The vehicle would need to be exported solely for the use of going from the port of entry to point A and then point A back to the port of entry. So by using the car while in Canada for leisure purposes or for transportation of goods or carrying, if you were an Uber driver and you were carrying folks around, you would be in violation of the conditions in the customs tariff.
So if that vehicle is caught at the grocery store, what are the penalties and the repercussions for that?
So the penalties can be monetary up to the duties and taxes owed on that vehicle. The vehicle may be seized for untrue statements.
Gets to be pretty expensive milk. All right, thanks. Can a vehicle be dual registered? Can it be registered in both countries at the same time? Is that possible?
I do not believe so. Again, the U.S. and Canadian have different standards, and as such, they reciprocate exactly what we do. So when you're permanently importing a vehicle into Canada, you have to make certain modifications to make it Canadian compliant. Modify daytime running lights, clutch interlock, and depending on the class of vehicle, different things. Likewise, the U.S. have slightly different things. So when you're importing a vehicle in the States, there is also a similar Registrar of Imported Vehicle program there where you have to bring your vehicle in and pay fees to actually have the vehicle modified and then inspected and recertified to the U.S. safety standards.
The North American road network doesn't end in the U.S. It goes all the way to the Darien Gap in Panama to Colombia. So how do our rules apply to other North and Central American vehicles that are not American or Canadian?
Okay. So basically, Motor Vehicle Safety Act currently is to ensure the Canadian vehicles coming in Canada are Canadian compliant. With NAFTA, or whatever it's called now, Mexican vehicles and U.S. vehicles are allowed into Canada under certain conditions, which is to be modified and inspected, because the safety standards are very similar between the U.S. and Canadian safety standards. And the Mexican vehicles, I believe as part of this importation package, they'll be reviewed at Gazette 2 at the end of this year, is to expand and allow Mexican vehicles to also come in. Beyond that, the vehicles cannot come in. The Motor Vehicle Safety Act says the vehicles have to be Canadian compliant, or the exception under the Act, which is 7.2, talks about vehicles that are purchased at the retail level in the United States that have no open recalls and can be modified to Canadian standards are allowed entry, and they have to do all this, the modifications, have it inspected prior to licensing and registering in a province and within 45 days. But again, that's for permanent importation.
Okay, it's all very clear as mud to me, so I appreciate that. Mr. Ruszkowski, I do have a question for you. There's a discussion of having snowbirds register the vehicles in the U.S., which is where this comes from in the first place, across the southern U.S. Why don't snowbirds want to have Canadian registered plates for their Canadian addresses while they're in the U.S.? Like, why wouldn't you just register it back at home?
Yeah, so I mean, there are a couple of instances. One example is most Canadian insurance providers, they limit the amount of time your Canadian registered vehicle can be outside of Canada to 6 months. So in order to combat that, if you had the U.S. registered vehicle, you'd be able to use that, beyond that time frame, and you would be able to drive that in Canada with, again, these regulatory changes which are pending. So again, because of those limitations, the only one that comes to mind for me is SGI in Saskatchewan, which would allow a Canadian registered vehicle to be in the U.S. For a prolonged period of time beyond the 6 month period. But other than that, most private insurers in Canada limit the amount of time you can have the vehicle outside of the country to 6 months. So that's why, again, people will purchase U.S. plated vehicles. It's a way to get around that.
And to tie up one of the other questions, I forget who asked it. Okay, never mind. Thank you, though.
Mr. Hardy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Actually, I wanted to build on that because I believe this might be some good communication material for Mr. Kimmich and other interested people to develop for people who might want to take advantage of this new regime, and that is what requirements U.S. insurers may have on those vehicles crossing into Canada. I used to work for the public auto insurer in BC, and I believe we had about the same rules as SGI did. But there's also mandatory minimum coverage limits that have to apply to a vehicle, a certain amount of third-party liability, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so I think it would be very wise if, in communicating this new regime, we made sure that Canadians bringing back those U.S.-plated cars checked with their insurance provider down there, because there could be some difficulties if a crash occurred and they were liable. I don't know if anybody has any knowledge of that or can comment on it.
Our guest may very well have on.
Go ahead, sir.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
I do have a little bit of personal knowledge with that. Not that I've attempted to bring a U.S. plated vehicle into Canada that we own, given the restrictions. But I had discussed with our own insurance company. Now, this is anecdotal because it applies to myself. It's Farmers Insurance, in case you're interested. And it would be the same conditions with them, that they would allow the vehicle in Canada and continue to insure the vehicle for, I believe it was 6 months. There's a different restriction going into Mexico and I presume further south, but Canada was fine.
Okay.
All right. Any further questions or comments? Mr. Kmiec, floor to you.
Maybe it was to my constituent, Tim. Based on everything you've heard from the officials so far, are you comfortable with the way the government officials are handling this importation permit and the changes and the amendments to the regulation?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Kimmich. I would just, one concern on the back of my mind here is that I was continually advised by Department of Transportation officials that this could not be handled by regulatory matters, that it had to require a change in legislation to accommodate. And sorry for not being familiar with process through legislation and regulatory, but it sounded to me as if these were regulatory changes that were coming and very much welcomed. I'm just concerned that this would require legislative changes as well. Perhaps officials from the Department of Transport can comment on that.
Absolutely. So to confirm, the proposed regulatory change is available online. There's a specific reference in the regulatory change, which is done pursuant to the Motor Vehicle Safety Act, or the legislation, specifically referring to that Canadian residents entering Canada with their U.S. registered vehicle would not have to pay any RIV fees.
Okay,
I'm going to cede the rest of my time to
Mr. Linsky, you're next if you'd like.
Thank you. This temporary importation permit, it will not change the standard that they can only drive it to point A and leave it at point A and then return to the port of entry.
No. So Transport Canada's temporary importation program, I believe our colleagues from CBSA, when they talk about a 30-day limit and limitations in driving, is for something that has not been, who's coming in through a Transport Canada approval. Once you're coming in with a Transport Canada approval for temporary importation, so basically, as mentioned, we've expanded on the rights. Currently, it's testing, evaluation, demonstration, so on. And we've expanded on these rights, but there is no restrictions on where the vehicle is used.
Have you checked with the provincial legislations, like the province of BC, province of Alberta? Some have 30-day restrictions, so you can't operate a vehicle with a foreign plate. If you're a resident of the province, will that not contradict?
We can only address from the federal level. The province is always retained.
I would say that we do, as a matter of course, for all of our regulatory initiatives relating to motor vehicle safety, we do consult with provinces and territories every time through the Canada Council of Motor Transport Administrators, and similarly invite provinces and territories to submit comments. The comment period has closed. We have not actually received any expressions of concerns from provinces and territories on this matter, or on this proposed amendment.
But they've been given the opportunity?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Right. Okay. Well, to all of our officials, thank you very much, especially to Mr. Reid for bringing these small issues forward to us. And I think Transportation Committee was very happy to help move it along. And congratulations to Mr. Kamick for some good work as a parliamentarian, and to Mr. Badaway and to all of the rest. So, meeting adjourned. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
You